You can't spell slaughter without laughter, and no one enjoys killing in the name of Khorne more than the demon prince Red Ulgor. In his former life, he was a pit fighter employed by a rather unsavory border prince, and after killing all who faced him in the arena, Ulgor was due a large reward of gold and freedom from his owner. Freedom being in quotations, of course, because slave owners are typically reticent to part ways with slaves who make them lots of money. But as the noble climbed into the pit to deliver his prize, Ulgor heard the blood god whisper, promising endless slaughter and ascension to demonhood. It wasn't a hard decision. In the end, we all know which reward he chose. Ulgor traded one form of slavery for another, but hey, there's more glory to be earned in service to Carneth than in the pits of the border princes, and in the royal rumbles of Warhammer 3, he found a calling. So, go figure. It's Demon o'clock, and Red Ulgor has some Nurglings to punish. He's a Prince of Slaughter, naturally, with Onslaught and Deathbringer, able to juice him upwards of 900 weapon strength and 25 bonus first large. So he's essentially a Bloodthirster with worse base stats, but better buffs and Gore Feast, so he regens in melee. Quite scary. He's a tough nut to crack, especially with that 25% magic resist, but he also costs 3,000 gold. Not sure he's actually worth that without access to any spells or wave clear potential. He's no Be'lakor, but he is a powerful duelist and a character that simply cannot be ignored. Naturally, the Demons of Chaos here will focus on the Khorne theme, but there's a blueberry twist thrown in for good measure. See, Tzeentch and Khorne are teaming up to bring down the Plague Father, so Exalted Bloodletters and Soul Grinders will be joined by Blue Horrors and another friend from the Forge of Souls. You guys know what's up with Soul Grinders now and what makes them each special at this point. Precursor Cannon Khorne Dog and Birdman Zeus Lightning Bolt Tzeentch with 40 bonus first large, but currently lacking his Baleful Flamer. CA, give him a flamethrower breath attack like dragons have, you cowards. Bunch of Blue Horrors, bunch of Bloodletters, as I said, and then on the flip side of this haunted forest come the armies of the Rotfather with a Soul Grinder of Nurgle in the vanguard for some downtown wave clear. Bunch of Plague Bears, which tend to trade better than Forsaken into Khorne infantry, 2 Happy Swamp Friends for a bit of mass dueling and debuffing, and a Heralds of Nurgle on his Palanquin throne, which gives him a ton of armor to pair with Fate of Buna, Spirit Leech, and Locus of Fecundity. Not easy to shoot him, because he's got 15% missile resist, 80 armor, and almost 7,000 HP, so he's a nice anchor in the middle of your line. It's going to be pretty difficult to snipe out. Besides that, it's a bunch of Nurglings and 2 Pox Riders, which as you saw in that Kislev battle from a few weeks back, I'm really warming up to. Very versatile unit with awesome models and animations. And those are the builds, so let's get it poppin'. Soul Grinder of Nurgle realizes pretty much immediately that Tzeentch Soul Grinder is a bit of an issue. He has no overshield to absorb these shots. Of course, he can't get healed by Locus of Fecundity, but there is no Fleshy Abundance Overcast Regrowth type of healing here, because it is lore of death, not lore of Nurgle. So can't really afford to just sit there and get plunked away by the bonus for large range attack of the Tzeentch Burb. Soul Grinder of Khorne into the thick of it, and that's where he belongs. Can't exactly burst through 10,000 HP of Plague Bears, but the Precursor Cannon and Flaming Sword can force the issue a little bit. Only the Pox Riders and Beasts of Nurgle can completely zone him out, and if they come forward, then they will become prime targets for the Tzeentch Grinder to make his presence known with that plus 40 bonus first large Zeus Thunderbolt from Mount Olympus. Plague Bears pushing up to the trees, good idea to get them into a little bit of cover to protect them from all the incoming fire. And the Plague Hulk just appeared from the forest on the other side, dropping some mortar salvos while Thunderbolt strike for the second time. This has the potential to be a difficult game for the Plague Hulk. There are 3 single entity monsters that kind of counter it. Red Ulgor is probably the biggest threat to his corpulent form. He can kind of fly in with impunity, land some attacks, and then get away before anything gets close. But of course, Nurgle has some counter to that. Curse of the Slug, their tier 1 army ability, can slow down single entity monsters and let the Beasts of Nurgle and the rest of the poison stack up and really slow them down. Dude's going Super Saiyan right now. I mean, it's just Nurgling, so not particularly difficult for him to slice his way through, but always fun to see Shockwave sending a bunch of bloaty boys flying across the battlefield. And when Khorne Demon Princes start channeling their ki for Kaioken, you don't want to be in the vicinity. It's bad news bears. Okay, so Demonic Onslaught and Deathbringer, both activated on Red Ulgor, the Prince of Slaughter. Bunch of Nurglings in the way, and that Soul Grinder's moving pretty fast. He's actually managed to extricate himself from the situation. because the Demon Prince is poisoned, now the Beasts of Nurgle are there to zone him out, and this is why you bring them. This is why you need them in so many matchups. They're your dueling. They're your very cheap mass, your very cheap poison, your very cheap debuffs, and if you throw two of them on a Bloodthirster or on a Demon Prince, he really can't stick around. So, Curse of the Slug, slowing him down. Spirit Leech, dealing a little bit of damage, but really not going to be great, even without the magic resist. On Ultra Unit size, it feels like Spirit Leech has just kind of been nerfed in Warhammer 3 compared to Warhammer 2. Max damage, it deals about 800, and units have 8,000 HP, and he has 25% magic resist, so Spirit Leech is really not going to be effective, but there's not a whole lot for Nurgle or the Lore of Death to use their spells on in this battle. I mean, the Blue Horrors have their Overshield, so does the Tzeentch Soul Grinder, and of course all the Khorne Demons have innate magic resist. So there really aren't any good targets for the Lore of Death. Meanwhile, Nurgle Soul Grinder being plunked down to about half HP. The Tzeentch Soul Grinder is pretty much out of ammunition and managed to, deal about half damage to a Plague Hulk. So, not exactly earth-shattering, especially considering it can heal back up and didn't lose any fighting effectiveness from taking those shots. But it is one of the most important units on the enemy side of the field, and now Red Ulgor can, for sure, think about landing and doing a little bit of dueling with this bad boy. Now, this is one of my favorite tactics with Nurgle. You can really bait your single entities hard because their healing is so ridiculous and they have so many sources of it. Remember, Locus of Fecundity, and Fleshy Abundance when you bring Lore of Nurgle means you can pretty much let your single entities get really, really low, force your opponent to overcommit, and then heal them back up to full when they move through their own troops. So Plague Bears coming into support, and the Plague Hulk will use all that mass to maneuver his way through and escape from the dangerous Tzeentch Soul Grinder and Red Ulgor Prince of Slaughter. Meanwhile, Nurgle pushing up on the right flank alongside the Pox Riders, and they should be able to bust through on that side without too many issues. The first of Nurgle's heals coming through, Locus of Fecundity, healing up the Soul Grinder and some Plague Bears that provided a little bit of support. Now, Red Ulgor and the Tzeentch friend from the Forge of Souls will retreat and look to charge into the demonic horde streaming in from the right flank. And Red Ulgor is about to go off, dropping the hammer. Cinematic as balls, but he doesn't want to spend too much time there. He's really best for hunting down those large single entities, the high value ones. So the Beast of Nurgle or the Palanquin Throne of the Herald are the good targets for him to pursue. Meanwhile, Pox Riders are chopping their way through a horde of blue horrors. Bloodletters not wanting to charge in and commit overly hard at the moment, waiting in reserve to see how things develop. And this engagement should definitely favor Nurgle, with the Bloodletters and the Blue Horrors getting a little bit grouped up. The Plague Hulk dropping those Plague Mortars from on high, and a Fate of Buna down on the Bloodletters. Of course, not a natural counter to them, but there's really no more effective target for them to use those Lore of Death spells on, so you might as well get some value rather than none. Spirit Leech and Fate of Buna are not going to be reaching the targets they'd like to be using them on, but that's okay. Make sure you get something out of it. And indeed, those Bloodletters are crumbling out from it quite quickly. While Red Ulgor takes a bunch of Death's Heads to the face. That was a nice close-range volley. Both the Plague Drones and the Exalted Plague Bearers of Nurgle can do a lot of damage to single entities with those Death's Heads. Exalted Bloodletters having to be committed to staunch the bleeding over on the Khorne left flank. Their Hellblades flashing, slicing through the Nurglings and the Plague Bears, and they should be able to win that, although Beasts of Nurgle and some of the other entities will make it a little bit more of a challenging fight. The Herald on his Palanquin slamming into the flank of the Bloodletters in the center. Meanwhile, Red Ulgor, Prince of Slaughter, and the Khorne Soul Grinder diving after that Corpulent Plague Hulk, and he better get his ass moving. And it's a good thing he's fast, because if he wasn't, he'd already be dead. He is looking quite unhealthy at the moment, though. Pox Riders aren't sure if they want to come back and support him, or instead charge to the center and try to get into the rear to deal with all these blue horrors. And in fact, it looks like they're going to go right up the middle and start spewing bile on all those overshields and get rid of all the fodder. And they're going to be needed here. They really need to help out if they want to deal with the Exalted Bloodletters, who should be able to tear through pretty much infinite numbers of Plague Bearers. But with the bonus versus infantry of those Pox Riders, then the Bloodletters should perform much more poorly in that engagement. Meanwhile, though, The Khorne Soul Grinder is still looking very healthy and should be able to outduel the Beasts of Nurgle. Now the Fleshhounds have made their move, coming in from the rear and landing a nice hammer and anvil on the Nurglings. Soul Grinder of Nurgle is on its last legs here and may crumble out if it doesn't get a heal soon. Fecundity, the second tier army ability from the Plague Father, healing a big portion of the army, and in fact that will stabilize the fetid freak that he is. It's a big heal. Nurgle healing, even without Fleshy Abundance, is pretty bananas in a lot of situations, but at the moment it doesn't look like it's enough to save this Beast of Nurgle, who is about to get RKO'd from the top rope. And the Red Prince living up to his name right now. Not spilling any blood. We don't have the blood pack yet. Sorry, guys. Maybe a couple more months. Maybe one day. But he's had his pick of the litter in terms of engagements so far, and both the Soul Grinders are still looking relatively healthy on the Khorne and Tzeentch side. Pox Riders are next on the agenda. That's an important unit to get rid of because they're one of the few that have the speed, mobility, and mass to tie down the Prince and allow the rest of the army start chunking him down. And he's got some cool animations, dude. I haven't seen all of these before. In fact, that might be the first time I've seen it. But he's got some style, for sure. And he's gore feasting the entire time, too. Remember that. That's really important. Because it means even though he's half HP right now, if he's fighting fodder, he's going to be healing more than he's taking into damage. So the Beast of Nurgle, the Soul Grinder, and that Palanquin Throne, they've got to team up. And with the Spirit Leeches, with their melee capabilities, everything, when he lands in the middle of the blob, go at him and finish him and do not let him escape. Because if he has time to regen, he is going to cause you a lot of pain. Laser Eyes on the Corpulent Freak. Well done from the Khorne Soul Grinder. Trying to land that killing blow, not able to do it. There's been a bunch of healing sent its way. Fecundity just went off for the second time this battle. Red Ulgor charging in from the other flank. Pox Rider's getting that full surround off now. And these kind of fights are really good for the Plague Father. Now Locust of Fecundity going to hit everything on the Rot Father's side. And even though the Exalted Bloodletters are charging in from the flank and the single entities are looking relatively healthy, they're beginning to get chunked down by all the AP still remaining in the Nurgle side. And also remember that the Exalted Plague Bearers are still around too, and they're about as tanky as infantry come. They're doing a great job just anchoring the center and providing a little bit more support. But that Plague Hulk is maybe one hit from death. Baleful Flamer from his mouth. He may not have a breath attack, but he can still have some pretty cool animations, and that's enough to finish him off for good. The Plague Hulk disappears back into the warp, into Nurgle's favorite garden, and that's a big loss. Got some decent value out of it for sure, but they could really use its melee capabilities, which are not incredible, but it has really high weapon strength and decent enough melee attack and melee defense stats that you'd like to have it anchoring your line in the middle of this grind. And what do you know? Tier 3 army abilities, the Sword of Khorne opening up. Red Ulgor has his favor indeed. And straight out of Doom, the Harbinger, dropping the hammer. And probably doing more damage to the Khorne and Tzeentch side, to be honest. There wasn't a whole lot of infantry left, but somehow the Exalted Plague Bears managed to face tank that. They're beginning to crumble, though. Beast of Nurgle and the Palanquin are still alive, but this is beginning to look more and more bleak for the children of the garden, and none of the single entities have died. And of course, Nurgle's lack of bonus for Slarge here is not helping. There's a Fate of Buna on the Fleshhounds of Khorne, which at this point, just use it on whatever you can. They're probably one of the worst targets in the game to use a Fate of Buna on. Callers of Khorne giving them 50% magic resist, of course, but again, there's nothing else to use your magic on. You might as well use whatever spells you can, whenever you can. And this is a situation where a double Great Unclean One build would have really been huge for Nurgle. Now, there's no way to know exactly what your opponent's going to be bringing, especially when they're playing as Demons of Chaos. I think the general consensus right now is that competitive players think Demons of Chaos would actually be okay for ranked, as long as they maybe didn't have access to Be'lakor, because Be'lakor is wild right now. He doesn't need nerfs or anything. He's just as strong as he should be, but I can see why CA was maybe thinking like, okay, I'm not sure he's like the most balanced character ever for ranked play. So I get that standpoint. Again, there's no way you're ever going to know what your opponent is bringing, and again, it's even harder to know when they're Demons of Chaos. In this situation, if you suspect that your opponent is going to be bringing in armored single entities, double Great Unclean One is the way to go. They would have been fantastic here. They probably could have won him the game if paired with Fleshy Abundance. If you try to surround an Exalted Great Unclean One, he's Mortis draining you, and then you finally get him low, and he hits you with that Overcast Fleshy Abundance and gets himself back up to half HP. Like, Red Ulgor and these Soul Grinders especially have no chance in a melee fight against that kind of DPS. So, yeah, that would have been really good. The biggest problem here, of course, was that the Lore of Death was just not effective. Soul Grinders were fantastic, 2200 damage value, 1800. Red Ulgor was also around 1600. And the Exalted Bloodletters did great too. But yeah, I mean, despite coming in kind of losing on the build roulette thing here, I think if Nurgle manages to get maybe even just one Great Unclean One on the field, but definitely two, I think there's a very good chance they manage to take that game, because two Great Unclean Ones will definitely outduel Red Ulgor. As powerful as the Prince of Slaughter is in melee, the double GUO play is very potent, and it was an exciting game nonetheless. So yeah, Nurgle needs bonus versus large, but they're dealing with armored single entities is always going to be around the Great Unclean One play. Just a question of if they're going to get shot down or not, and in this case I don't think 3 or 4 blue horrors would have been enough to kill them. So hope you guys enjoyed. See you next time. Peace out.